The lantern light trembled in the wind, throwing long, broken shadows across the stone path leading to the mansion's iron gates. Luke Carver sat motionless in his saddle, staring at the figure curled against the pillar barefoot, shivering, palms pressed together as if praying to whatever god still listened. She lifted her head when she heard his horse. Her hair was soaked from the cold mist, her cheeks hollow, her lips split from wind and hunger. But the eyes, the same hazel eyes he once memorized down to their last fleck, met his with a quiet terror. "Luke," she whispered, "please, don't ride away." A man who had once built an entire future around her tightened his jaw and said nothing. Rich men didn't just build mansions in the middle of cattle country. They built fortresses to remind men like him what they did not have. And Shiana May Hollis had traded her entire heart for the comfort behind those glowing windows. Yet here she was, begging outside the same mansion she left him for. But let's go back to where it all started. The drought of '79 had cracked the earth around the Carver ranch into a map of hard veins. Grass grew sickly and thin. Cattle kicked dust instead of feeding. When the wind blew, it carried the taste of iron and memory, reminding Luke of every promise he'd once made to his mother, to his father, and to the girl who used to sit with him on the porch swing at dusk. Luke never hated the land. He hated how much of himself it demanded. The morning the stranger first appeared, the ranch was so quiet you could hear the slow groan of the windmill turning. Luke had just finished doctoring a lame heifer when he heard something behind the barn, a dull, dragging sound like boots too heavy for the man wearing them. He walked slow, hand resting near his holster, though he didn't believe in drawing before he needed to. A mule stood tied between two cedar posts, sweat dripping from its flanks. And slumped beside a water barrel was a man Luke had never seen, shirt torn, ribs bruised purple, throat raw with dust. The man lifted his head. "Water. He CROAKD. Not Comanche. Not Kiowa, not a ranch hand. Not even a drifter by the look of him. His coat bloodied and torn had once belonged to the kind of men who dealt in money. More than cattle. Luke hesitated. Strangers didn't collapse on your land without reason. Either they were running from something, or something was running after them. But when the man's hand shook trying to lift the dipper, something inside Luke cracked, the same soft place he tried to bury years ago. He knelt beside him. "Sip slow," he murmured. The man drank like someone who'd tasted death and didn't care for the flavor. Luke asked him no questions then. Questions had a way of coming back at you like ricochets. Instead, he helped the stranger to the barn, laid him down in the hay, and lit a lantern to see the full extent of the damage. The bruises weren't made by fists. They were made by boots, heavy ones, men who needed him alive. But not too alive. Luke swallowed the rising unease. That same unease twisted again when he heard the crunch of wagon wheels on the road, leading up to his ranch. Sound traveled easy in the dry season, and this wasn't the sound of neighbors dropping by. It was heavier, slower, deliberate. Luke stepped outside just as the sun dipped behind the ridge, painting the sky in a rusted orange. The wagon wasn't close enough to make out faces, but the silhouettes, 3 men, wide-brimmed hats, leaned forward like hunters spotting a wounded deer. He felt the first drop of tension settle in his gut like a stone. Inside his barn lay a half-dead stranger, outside roadmen who weren't coming for coffee. And somewhere far beyond the ridge lived the woman who once promised him forever, only to walk away with a man whose boots cost more than Luke's horse. Luke inhaled slowly, tasting dust and fate on the air. This stranger had brought something dangerous to his doorstep. And for the first time in years, Luke Carver didn't know whether he was about to save a life or lose the rest of his own. Luke stood on the porch, watching the wagon roll toward his ranch like a slow-moving storm that already knew its destination. The stranger was still unconscious in the barn. The mule he'd arrived with pawed nervously at the dirt, as if sensing the kind of men who'd soon be stepping onto this land. The 3 riders didn't bother masking their approach. They stopped 20 yards from the house, close enough to show they weren't scared, far enough to pretend they respected boundaries. The tallest one tipped his hat, though his smile was the kind a man wore right before he started digging your grave. Asterisk. Evening, Carver, the man said. Heard you might have seen someone come through here? Fella ridden a gray mule. Lost, confused, maybe looking for help. Asterisk Luke didn't answer. His silence was its own kind of weapon. Asterisk the tall man's smile grew thinner. Well now, no need for things to get tense. Just looking to bring our friend home? He skipped out on a bit of business. Business? Luke repeated quietly. Another man on the wagon leaned forward. His coat was too fine for ranch work. His boots polished. His eyes cold. He stole from Mr. Hollis, the man said. And Mr. Hollis does not appreciate being robbed. The name hit Luke harder than a fist. Hollis, Anna's husband, the man she chose over him. Asterisk Luke kept his face still, but his pulse betrayed him. If these men noticed, they didn't show it. Asterisk. He came through here? The tall man pressed again. Asterisk Luke could feel the sweat gathering behind his neck. Not from fear, but from the weight of the decision strangling his ribcage. Asterisk. He thought about the warnings he'd heard in town. Asterisk men who worked for Hollis weren't lawmen. They weren't even criminals. They were something in between, men who believed money made its own justice. Asterisk Luke didn't look at them when he said, Ain't seen anyone. Asterisk the tall man studied him for a few long seconds, his gaze sliding across the property with slow, measuring suspicion. Asterisk funny thing, he murmured. Tracks on the road say otherwise? Asterisk Luke shrugged, though the motion felt stiff. Tracks don't carry names. Asterisk the man let out a small laugh. Well, ain't that something? Asterisk the tension pulled tighter. Even the wind stopped moving. Asterisk one of the men hopped down. He was younger, meaner looking, the type who liked hurting people because it made him feel tall. His boots thunked across the dry dirt as he began strolling toward the barn doors. Asterisk Luke stepped down from the porch. Barns off limits. Asterisk the young man didn't stop walking. Just taking a peek. Asterisk don't, Luke said, his voice low, controlled. Asterisk in the shrinking distance between them. A decision lived. Asterisk either Luke let them find the stranger, or he crossed a line he could never uncross. The young man grinned like he'd been waiting for Luke to push back. Your barn ain't the law, Carver. Asterisk no, Luke said. But I am. The young man reached for the barn latch. Luke moved. Asterisk not fast. Not aggressive, just a step forward, one boot planted in front of the other, steady as stone. His hand rested over his holster without drawing the weapon. Asterisk. Open that door, Luke said quietly, and I'll take it as trespass. Asterisk the tall man lifted a hand. Boy, he called. Get back here. Asterisk the young one spat and turned away. But his eyes promised they'd return with a reason to leave Luke bleeding. Asterisk Mr. Hollis won't like this, the taller man said, reins tightening. You're protecting a thief. A liar. A man who owes a debt that ain't his to run from. Asterisk Luke didn't blink. Man half dead don't owe anybody anything. Asterisk you're macking trouble where there didn't have to be any. Asterisk Luke stood tall. If it's coming either way. Asterisk the tall man exhaled, disappointed. Suit yourself. Asterisk they turned their wagon around, but not in defeat. In promise. Asterisk as the sound of hooves faded, Luke finally let out the breath he'd been holding. He walked to the barn door and pushed it open. The stranger lay exactly where he left him, sweating through fever. Eyes closed, Luke stared down at the broken man. By helping him, Luke had just declared a quiet war with the richest, most vindictive man in the county. Asterisk and the woman Luke once loved more than life itself was married to the man now hunting the stranger he'd chosen to protect. Pressure tightened around him like a noose. Asterisk he'd made his choice. Asterisk now the consequences were coming. Dust rising on the horizon, carried by men with money, guns, and a reason to settle scores. The night settled heavy over the Carver ranch, the kind of darkness that seemed to press against the windows, listening for secrets. Luke walked the property with a lantern in hand, its small glow barely pushing back the shadows. Asterisk. The stranger who still hadn't woken lay inside the barn, wrapped in an old horse blanket. His breathing rasped in shallow, uneven pulls. Each one a reminder of what Luke was risking. Asterisk a man dying on your land was trouble. Asterisk a man being hunted on your land was war, and Luke could feel war coming long before he heard it. At first, it was just the wind shifting east, carrying with it a faint tremor. Not sound exactly more like a vibration under the skin. The horses in the corral felt it too. They lifted their heads all at once, ears pricked toward the road. Asterisk Luke paused. Lantern raised slightly. There it was again, not thunder. Not cattle, hoofbeats, slow, measured, too many to count individually. Asterisk Luke doused the lantern. Darkness swallowed him. He waited. The hoofbeats didn't come closer. They hovered somewhere down the road. Low and steady, like men holding position just outside the reach of his property line, watching, waiting, asterisk sending. A message without speaking a word. Asterisk Luke felt a cold line trace down his spine. Asterisk they weren't coming tonight. Not yet. They were letting him know he didn't have long. He walked back toward the barn, boots crunching softly in the brittle dirt. Every step felt heavier, like each one drew him deeper into a choice he couldn't unmake. Asterisk when he slipped inside. The stranger stirred for the first time. Asterisk Luke knelt beside him. You awake? Asterisk the man's lips moved, dry and cracked. Water. Asterisk Luke held the dipper to his mouth, steady as a doctor. The man drank weakly, then sagged back into the hay pile. Asterisk, who's chassin' you? Luke asked. Asterisk, no answer. Not at first. Asterisk, then the stranger swallowed hard and whispered, men. From the Hollis estate. Asterisk Luke's jaw tightened. He already knew that part. What he needed was why. Asterisk, what did you steal? Luke asked. Asterisk, the man shook his head slowly. Didn't steal, I brought something back. Something that wasn't supposed to be found? Asterisk Luke frowned. What was it? Asterisk the man's eyes glazed with fever. A letter meant for a woman. For Anna? Asterisk Luke froze. His heart kicked against his ribs like a trapped animal. Asterisk. Anna. Her name felt like someone had cut old scar tissue open with a sharp blade. What about her? Luke asked, voice low, tight. Asterisk the stranger blinked slowly, fighting sleep. She didn't know what her husband did. What he was planning. I found the letter from a man he ruined. He wanted her to know the truth. Asterisk the pieces snapped, together like bones aligning after a break. Hollis had secrets Anna wasn't supposed to learn them. Asterisk this. Stranger had tried to get a message to her and paid the price. Asterisk Luke leaned back, breath unsteady. He stared at the barn door, feeling the weight of the darkness outside pressing closer, as if the night itself carried Hollis's anger. Asterisk before he could ask more. The stranger's eyes rolled shut again. Asterisk a sudden flicker of light caught Luke's attention, the horizon glowing orange for a brief second, then disappearing. A signal, a controlled burn, a lantern flash, a warning. Asterisk someone up on Hollis's ridge had lit it. Asterisk Luke stepped outside, staring at the place where the brief glow had been. The night grew still around him, so quiet it hummed. Then the wind shifted again. This time the hoofbeats came closer. Asterisk one set. Just one, a scout, a figure on horseback rode along the boundary of Luke's property, not crossing, but close enough to send a chill through him. The silhouette paused, just a dark cutout against the faint moonlight before turning and disappearing. Back down the road. Asterisk Luke's heartbeat thudded in his ears. They weren't waiting anymore. They were mapping the land, testing his resolve, preparing for the moment they'd ride in together. And not stop at the porch. Asterisk he walked back into the barn, shut the door, and leaned against it. Asterisk his ranch had always been quiet, lonely, predictable. Tonight it felt like a powder keg. The stranger murmured something in his sleep on his name again. Barely audible, but sharp as a knife. Luke exhaled through his teeth. Hollis's men were coming. Anna was tangled in the center of whatever storm this was, and Luke Carver, against every ounce of common sense he'd ever lived by, was standing between a dying man and a threat. Powerful enough to burn down half the county, asterisk, the hoofbeats faded, but the danger didn't. It only got closer in the silence that followed. The sky was the color of bruised metal when dawn crept over the hills. Luke hadn't slept. He didn't dare. He sat inside the barn with his back to a post, hat tipped low, shotgun across his lap. The stranger breathed in soft, uneven pulls beside him, asterisk outside. The world felt too still, like the land itself was holding its breath, asterisk when the barn door creaked open. Luke's hand flew to his holster, but it wasn't Hollis's men. It was her, asterisk Anna, stood in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl too thin for the morning cold. Her hair, usually pinned in the careful style the Hollis mansion demanded, fell loose around her shoulders, messy, frantic, as if she'd ridden here before the sun even had a chance to settle on the hills. Asterisk she closed the door fast behind her. Luke, I had to come. Asterisk Luke rose slowly, guardedly. You shouldn't be here. Asterisk her chest rose and fell with brittle breaths. They're coming, she whispered. My husband. He's furious. He thinks you're hiding the man who stole from him. Asterisk Luke gave a humorless half-smile. Funny, that ain't exactly the story I heard. Asterisk Anna's lips parted, confused. But Luke didn't explain, not yet. Instead, he stepped aside so she could see the stranger lying on the hay. Her face drained of color. Asterisk, oh God, she whispered, hand over her mouth. Asterisk Luke watched her carefully. She wasn't pretending. Her fear felt real enough to touch. Asterisk, you know him? Luke asked. Asterisk she nodded shakily. He's a bookkeeper. Name's Ezra. Worked for Hollis 10 years. Loyal, quiet, never hurt anyone. Her eyes lifted to Luke's, full of a hurt he hadn't seen since the night she said goodbye. My husband had him beaten for trying to leave. Ezra wasn't stealing money, he was escaping. Asterisk Luke didn't move. Didn't breathe? Asterisk? And? Luke asked. Asterisk Anna swallowed hard. He was trying to deliver something. To me. There it was, the truth, spoken by the woman Luke once planned a future around. Asterisk she stepped closer to Ezra, kneeling beside him. Her fingers trembled as she lifted a piece of torn paper from the pocket of his broken coat. Luke hadn't noticed it. It must have been clutched inside the lining. She unfolded it and her breath hitched. What is it? Luke asked quietly. Asterisk her eyes filled, but she forced out the words. A confession. From a man named Nolan Briggs? Before he died. Asterisk Luke stiffened. Nolan Briggs was a rancher from the far valley, a decent man who'd lost his land years ago in a suspicious foreclosure. Everyone whispered Hollis had rigged the auction. No one proved it. Asterisk Anna's fingers gripped the page until it crinkled. Nolan wrote that Hollis bribed the land office, forced false debt, made Nolan sign everything over at gunpoint. I never believed the rumors. I thought people hated my husband because he was wealthy. Asterisk Luke didn't speak. Some truths were better left to silence. Asterisk tears slipped down Anna's cheeks. Nolan begged Ezra to get this to me. Said if Hollis could do this to one family, he'd do it again. Ezra tried. My husband found out. She looked at Luke, then really looked at him. You didn't owe Ezra anything. You could have handed him over. You could have let him die on the road. Asterisk Luke's jaw tightened. Didn't sit right. Asterisk Anna's voice softened. Nothing ever does when you know kindness before pride. Asterisk a long, quiet beat passed. Dust floated in the thin rays of morning light like drifting sparks. Asterisk for the first time since she stepped into the barn, Anna reached for Luke's hand. He didn't pull away. He didn't accept it either. His hand stayed still, fingers cold, caught somewhere between the past and what lay in front of him now. Asterisk, he saved my life once, Anna whispered, glancing at Ezra. Years before I'd married Hollis. Ezra helped me hide in town when some drunks tried to follow me. He never told anyone, he said. He said decent people don't leave others in danger. Asterisk, her voice cracked. Luke, don't let them take him. Asterisk outside, a crow cried sharply, then silence again. Heavy, warning silence. Luke squeezed his eyes shut. The weight of the moment pressed on him. Steady and suffocating. Anna. He began, but the sound of hoofbeats cut through the morning air like a blade. Near, close, certain. Anna's eyes widened. He brought them. Luke moved to the door. Peeking through a crack in the boards, dozens, riders lined up on the ridge guns holstered. But hands ready, at the front sat a tall man in a dark coat. Hollis. Luke exhaled a slow breath. Heavy as gravel, the moment of peace that lived briefly in this barn was over. The standoff had come. The riders spread across the ridge like a dark curtain drawn tight across the morning sky. They didn't rush. They didn't shout. They moved with the calm of men convinced the land already belonged to them. Hollis rode at the center. Boots polished, coat pressed, posture straight as if he were sitting in a parlor instead of a saddle. His men fanned out behind him, forming a silent wall of horses and guns. Luke stood outside the barn, shotgun held low but ready. Anna stayed just inside the doorway, half hidden in the shadows. Ezra lay unconscious farther back, breathing in fevered gasps. For a moment. The world felt too still, like breath held before the first clap of thunder. Hollis raised a hand. His men stopped. Carver, he called, voice smooth as oiled hinges. I'll give you one chance to step aside. Luke didn't move. You're on my land, Hollis. I'm here for what's mine. Luke's jaw tightened. Half-dead bookkeeper ain't property. A soft laugh drifted from the ridge. Not amused, dismissive. He stole from me, Hollis replied. And a thief pays his debts. Anna stepped out of the barn then. Surprising Luke and startling Hollis enough to make him sit forward in the saddle. Ezra didn't steal from you, she said, her voice carrying across the cold morning air. He was trying to deliver a truth you buried. Hollis's expression didn't change, but the men behind him shifted uneasily. Go home, Anna, he said without looking at her. This isn't your concern. Yes, it is, she said. Everything you've done. Everything you hid from me, it's all my concern. Something in her voice steady. Cracking but unbroken sent a quiet ripple through the air. Luke watched Hollis closely. The man didn't like being challenged, especially not by someone who was supposed to stand behind him, not against him. You think you know what's happening here? Hollis asked. That man, he pointed toward the barn, betrayed me. Betrayed you. He forged claims, broke into my study, attacked one of my men. That's a lie. Anna said, her voice was calm, certain. She held up the torn note Luke had seen earlier. He brought this. Nolan Briggs wrote it before he died. Hollis's jaw twitched not much, but enough for Luke to catch it. Give that to me, Hollis ordered. No, Anna said. And in that moment, Luke knew something in her had severed cleanly from the man she'd married. The line between them wasn't frayed, it was gone. You deceived people, Anna said quietly. Stole their land. Threatened them. Ezra didn't betray you, you betrayed everyone. A few of Hollis's men looked at each other, uncertain now. Doubt was a dangerous crack in any alliance. Hollis saw it too. His face hardened. Carver, he said, ignoring Anna entirely now. Step aside, or I'll consider your protection of this man an act of aggression. Luke's grip tightened around the shotgun. His heart pounded steady, but not fast. He knew this road. Knew its cost. He stepped forward. No. A long silence followed, heavy as the space between lightning and thunder. Finally Hollis breathed out a thin, humorless sigh. You were always predictable, he said. That bleeding heart of yours was bound to get you killed someday. Anna's voice rose behind Luke. If you kill him, you kill me too. Hollis turned sharply in the saddle. What did you say? Anna stepped out fully now, standing beside Luke. Her shoulders shook, but her chin stayed high. I won't go back with you, she said. Not after this. Not ever. Asterisk Hollis stared at her with something colder than anger entitlement cracking at the seams. Asterisk, you think he can protect you? Hollis asked. He couldn't protect you then, and he can't now. Anna looked at Luke, and Luke, after years of silence, regret, wondering, looked back. Asterisk, I don't need him to protect me, Anna said. I just need him to stand beside what's right. The air shifted, something in Hollis's posture. Broke. The certainty. The ownership. The quiet thread his men had always followed without question. Asterisk, fine, he said softly. Let the world see you for the fool you are, Anna. He turned to his men. We're done here. It stunned everyone, even Luke. Hollis wasn't retreating. He was cutting her loose. Removing the one piece of his life he couldn't control. Asterisk, the riders turned in a slow, synchronized motion and began descending the ridge. Dust rising behind them like the tail of a dying storm. Asterisk, Luke didn't lower the shotgun until they were nothing but specks on the far horizon. Asterisk, Anna's legs gave out, and she sank to her knees in the dirt. Luke knelt beside her, steadying her shoulders. Asterisk, you okay? He asked quietly. Asterisk, her voice barely made it past her lips. I thought he'd kill you. He might try someday, Luke said. Then I'll stand with you. Asterisk, they stayed like that a long moment, two people who'd broken apart, now piecing something fragile together in the ashes of a morning that changed everything. Asterisk, inside the barn, Ezra stirred. His eyes opened for the first time, weak, confused, alive. Asterisk, you made it, Anna whispered. Asterisk, Ezra nodded faintly, eyes drifting toward Luke. Thank you. Asterisk, Luke shook his head. Thank her. Asterisk, Anna took Luke's hand, then, not in desperation, not in guilt, but in quiet recognition. Asterisk, the sun climbed gently over the ridge, lighting the land in a warm, forgiving glow. Asterisk, Hollis was gone. His hold over both their lives? Broken, Ezra would heal. Anna would decide her future. Asterisk, Luke would finally stop running from the past. Some stories ended with gunfire. This one ended with truth and the slow, steady breath of a second chance neither of them expected to earn. Asterisk, the prairie wind carried the scent of a new day across Luke Carver's land. Asterisk, a beginning, not an ending.